Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday, Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Wednesday? Sharon in New Jersey, Melissa in Great Neck, Bill in mid-Missouri, Guy in Ohio, Paula in the Great Northwest, Joe in the Inland Empire, Shandor in the Bronx, Belle in Florida, Belle in Texas, Karen in Northern California, John in Maine, Tom in PA, Lucy in Minnesota, Elanit in Silver Spring, Aoife in Florida, Marjorie in Georgia, Chaim in Florida, Alan in New York City. Hope to see you at the Guns N' Moses New York City premiere on Monday night, November 18th. Nina, could you share that link to the tickets to the New York City premiere? I think we always put it on Facebook, but let's make sure it's on YouTube as well. And Ella in Southern California. Welcome, everybody. Tonight's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by our very own John Shore in Arizona for the Refuah Shlema of Leah Bas Chava. May Leah Bas Chava have a complete and speedy recovery. We say Amen. John, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. We say Amen. And thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. And it is our annual campaign, so we would certainly appreciate if everybody helps us share more Torah with more people around the world. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. And one last little thing. Check it out! I'm so excited. It came today. It's my book. My new book. I'm an author. And it's so awesome, I gotta tell you. I mean, it's like, it's so awesome. It's better this way. You know, every page is a joke. All the jokes are numbered. Like the famous joke about the guy who's in prison for his first night. And some guy in the cell block says 23 and everyone cracks up. And another guy a little later down the cell block says 78 and everybody in the cell block cracks up. And the new guy's like, what's going on? And his cellmate says, we've all been here so long, we've heard all the jokes, so we just number them to be a little bit more efficient. He says, oh, really? Well, let me try. And he shouts out, 18. Nobody laughs. And he says to the cellmate, what's going on? The cellmate says, you told it wrong. But the point of numbering the jokes in my joke book is that I have lists at the front. Greatest Jewish jokes for a wedding toast, for the golf course, for a first date, for a bar mitzvah, for a business meeting, etc. In similar situations, you got the best jokes for these situations. And of course, there's overlap. And that's why all the jokes had to be numbered. God willing, this will be a bestseller and everyone will start learning the jokes by number and people really will say to each other, hey, 34. People will laugh. That's my dream. But at any rate, we're so proud and it is available on Amazon. Nina can put the link, but also it's just search for Salvador Litvak. It comes right up. It's already a bestseller. They're going to start delivering on November 26th. But you can pre-order now and it will arrive, I think, on the 26th or very close to it. Unbelievable holiday gift. You cannot go wrong with the greatest Jewish jokes of all time. Okay. Let's get busy. Doing a double daf, but they're short, so no problem. We won't go so long. Our pages today are 141 and 142 here in Tractate Bava Basra, 23rd volume of the Talmud. We're continuing our discussion of Mishna number 2 in chapter 9. Picking it up on page 141a, pretty close to the bottom of 141a. 141 and 142 we're doing tonight. Okay, our Mishnah discusses a case where a man stipulated that if his wife gives birth to a male, the offspring shall receive 100 dinars as a gift, right? The baby will receive 100 dinars as a gift if it's a male. And if she gives birth to a female, the baby girl will receive a gift of 200 dinars. So the Mishnah states that if she gave birth to both a male and a female, like twins, boy and girl, so the male receives the 100 dinars and the female receives 200 dinars. Because the man said, right, if she gives birth to a boy, the boy will receive. If she gives birth to a girl, the girl will receive. They were both inside her when he said that. And so both get the gift that he promised. So the Gemara asks, but with regard to that which is taught in a baraisa, that if she gave birth to a male and a female, the male receives 6 dinars of gold, which are equivalent to 150 dinars of silver, and the female receives 2 dinars of gold, which is equivalent to 50 dinars of silver. With what situation is this baraisa dealing if it's not our situation? And Rav Ashi said, I said this law before Rav Kahana, and he explained it as teaching about one who inverted the stipulations of his gift. What does inverted mean? The baraisa is referring to a man who said, if a male baby is born first, he shall receive 200 dinars. And if a female is born after him, she will receive nothing. And if a female baby is born first, she will receive 100 dinars. And if a male is born after her, he will receive 100 dinars. So these amounts are not in any way tied to, like some kind of valuation of the child or what he would prefer the gender be. And this is not even meant to be a real life situation. What they're getting at, the reason that they've just sort of drawn up these numbers arbitrarily, is to address the question of, can a gift be given to a person who does not yet exist? That's what's really going on here. So let's keep reading. Right, so he said, if a male is born first, the baby's going to receive 200 dinars. If the female is born after him, she gets nothing. If a female is born first, she gets 100, and the male born after her, he gets 100. Okay? So he's going to give away 200 dinars. If the male is born first, he gets all of it, and the female gets nothing, born after him. But if the female is born first, she gets 100, and the male gets 100. And then what happens? The mother gave birth to a male and a female. Okay, so according to what he said, the male should get the 200 dinars, and the female should get nothing in terms of gifts that the father is giving to the babies. But we do not know which of them emerged from the womb first. There was a lot going on in the delivery room. Somehow nobody noticed, or maybe the midwife was there and then she was suddenly called away to do another birth and she never came back, and they don't know. The mother and the father don't know which baby came out first. In this case, says the Baraisa, the male takes 100 dinars, as whichever way you look at it, this sum is due to him, right? Because the man said if the male is born first, he gets 200 dinars. If the male is born second, he gets 100 dinars. So either way, the male baby gets 100 dinars. And the other 100 dinars are property of uncertain ownership. And so they're divided equally between the male and the female. So he gets the 100 that he for sure he was going to get anyway. And about the other 100, the male and the female split it. Now the Gemara asks, and with regard to that which is taught in another Baraisa, that if she gave birth to a male and a female, he receives only 100 dinars. How can you find these circumstances? What was that all about? And Ravina said, this is referring to one who said, I shall give a certain sum to whoever informs me. This is not a gift promised to the baby, and some of, a certain amount if it's a male baby and a different amount if it's a female baby. And remember that the case in our Mishna that we're covering is where the female baby gets more because, the father wanted to give the female more because he thinks that the female has need for more money, thinking about the dowry, later in her life, etc. Okay, but now we're talking about a different situation entirely. It's not a gift to the baby. Now this father is promising a gift of 100 dinars to whoever comes and tells him that his baby was born. I mean, maybe he's a general on the battlefield. And he says, whoever brings me the news first that my wife had a baby, I'm going to give 100 dinars to this person. Now we're on 141b. And this is as it is taught in a baraisa, in a case where one said, whoever informs me as to what opened my wife's womb, this is a colorful way of saying, what is the sex of her child? Is it a male or a female? So if it is a male, the one who informs me shall receive 100 dinars. Therefore, if the wife gave birth to a male, the one who, reaches the father first and tells him this news that his wife gave birth to a male, this messenger receives the 100 dinars. If the father also said, if it is a female, the messenger shall receive 100 dinars. Then if she gave birth to a female, the messenger receives 100 dinars. If she gave birth to a male and a female, he receives only 100 dinars, because presumably only one of them came out first. So the Gemara challenges, but since he did not say anything about male and female, he wasn't contemplating twins, he was just thinking one baby was going to come out. So if she gave birth to a male and a female, perhaps the messenger should receive nothing. Why does the Baraisa state that he receives 100 dinars? And the Gemara answers, this is referring to where the father also said, if she gives birth to a male and a female, he shall also receive 100 dinars. And the Gemara asks, but if he stated all of the possibilities, that she gives birth to a male, that she gives birth to a female, that she gives birth to a male and a female, so then what did his stipulations exclude? And the Gemara answers, they serve to exclude a case where she gives birth to a non-viable newborn, in which case the messenger receives nothing. Because the promise to give a reward was only if, this messenger brings the news of, in this case, a male or a female, or a male and a female. Okay, new subject. The Gemara relates there was a certain man who said to his wife, my property is given to the one with whom you are pregnant. What? No, he's not saying I'm going to give all my property to some man who got you pregnant, my wife. He's saying my property is given to the fetus in your belly. That's the one with whom you are pregnant. It's just a way of saying the fetus in your belly. Okay? So the father is saying that he's going to give as a gift all his property to the unborn child, the fetus. Okay? So about this situation, Rav Huna said, this is a case of one who transfers ownership of an item to a fetus. And in the case of one who transfers ownership of an item to a fetus, the fetus does not acquire the item. Okay, that is the view of Rav Huna. You cannot make a gift to a fetus because the fetus is not a person who is in the world, and therefore the fetus cannot receive the gift. That's the view of Rav Huna. Rav Nachman raised an objection to the opinion of Rav Huna, to the opinion in the Mishna, which states, with regard to one who says, if my wife gives birth to him, Rav Nachman raised an objection to the opinion of Rav Huna by citing our Mishnah, right? So Rav Huna says a fetus can't receive a gift. Rav Nachman is going to cite our Mishnah that we've been talking about, which states, with regard to one who says, if my wife gives birth to a male, the offspring shall receive 100 dinars. Then if she in fact gave birth to a male, the offspring, the male baby, does receive 100 dinars. Well, this indicates that the fetus did acquire the money. So Rav Nachman is saying, there you go, Rav Huna. This man said, if my wife gives birth to a male, the male baby shall receive 100 dinars. And then she gives birth to the male, so the baby gets the 100 dinars. Sounds like when he made the promise is when there was just a fetus, and the fetus does indeed have a right to receive that money. So a fetus can receive a gift, says Rav Nachman, citing our Mishnah as an answer to Rav Huna. This indicates that the fetus did acquire the money. Rav Huna said to Rav Nachman, I do not know who taught our Mishnah. It is not identifiable with a known opinion, and presumably the text has been corrupted. Rav Huna says, well, the Mishnah, as you're citing it, would disprove my contention that a fetus cannot receive a gift, but I'm not sure that you have cited the Mishnah correctly. So the Gemara asks, why did Rav Huna reply in this manner? But let him rather say to Rav Nachman, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says a person can transfer ownership of an entity that has not yet come into the world. For example, produce that has not yet grown. And just as Rabbi Meir maintains that one can transfer ownership of an entity that has not yet come into the world, so too he maintains that one can transfer ownership of an item to a fetus, which has not yet been born. Now, that's what Rav Huna could have answered Rav Nachman. This view of Rabbi Meir, that one can transfer ownership of something that is not yet in the world, and that therefore one could also transfer a gift to a fetus which is not yet in the world, is the view of Rabbi Meir, according to the way the Gemara just expressed it. Rabbi Meir is a minority opinion, that he says you can transfer ownership of something not yet in the world. The rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Meir say, no, you can't do that. So Rabbi Meir, whenever we talk about, according to Rabbi Meir, we can transfer ownership of something not yet in the world, remember that that's a minority view. Okay, so nevertheless, Rabbi Huna could have answered Rav Nachman by saying, well, this view that you're citing is a minority view, right? And we don't hold by that. But the Gemara rejects this explanation. Say that you heard Rabbi Meir express this opinion with regard to transferring ownership of an entity that has not yet come into the world to an entity that is in the world. In other words, Rabbi Meir said you can transfer ownership of something that doesn't yet exist, like, for example, the egg that my chicken will lay tomorrow. I am going to gift it to you, or I'm going to sell it to you. It hasn't been laid yet, but I'm going to transfer it now. So Rabbi Meir says you can do that. The majority say you can't do that. However, even Rabbi Meir is saying, I will sell you or I will gift you the egg that my chicken will lay tomorrow. But who is Rabbi Meir saying that to? He's saying, I can transfer it to you. I can transfer it to a living person. Did we hear Rabbi Meir say that you can transfer ownership to an entity that doesn't yet exist? He only said that we can transfer ownership of an object that doesn't yet exist, but we can transfer it to a person that does exist. No one heard Rabbi Meir say that we can transfer ownership of anything to a person that does not yet exist. So the Gemara proposes another resolution to Rav Nachman's objection, right? So the objection is that according to our Mishnah, the gift to a fetus works because the fetus is entitled when it's born to this 100 dinars that the father promised. So Rav Huna says a fetus cannot acquire property. So now the Gemara is going to propose another resolution to Rav Nachman's objection. Let Rav Huna say to Rav Nachman, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. What does Rabbi Yosef say? He says that a fetus acquires ownership. It says it pretty explicitly. A fetus can acquire ownership. Where does he say that? In a Mishnah, tractate Yevamos, page 67a. With regard to an Israelite woman who married a priest, and he died and left her pregnant. Okay, so to understand what's going on here, recall that terumah, right, which is the first part of the tithing process, the first 2% of produce, when the temple is standing in Jerusalem and the tithing is being practiced as it is practiced when the temple is standing. Okay, so the first 2% of a crop is given to a Kohen, to a priest. That's terumah. That food is consecrated. Only a Kohen can eat it, with the exception of the members of his household, right? So his wife and his children and his slaves can also eat terumah. But a non-priest cannot eat terumah. And if a woman is married to a priest and he dies or they get divorced, then she can no longer eat terumah unless she is the daughter of a priest and she returns to her father's house and she can eat terumah in her father's house. But if she was only allowed to eat terumah by virtue of being married to a priest and then that marriage ended, Then she can no longer eat terumah. Okay, so that's the background here. So what happens in this Mishnah? Okay, so in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who says in a Mishnah tractate of Amos 67a, with regard to an Israelite woman who married a priest and he died, but he left her pregnant, the fetus disqualifies the father's Canaanite slaves from partaking of terumah. Right? That's interesting. So the wife and the slaves were eating terumah by virtue of living in the household of the priest. It's interesting, the mother's not disqualified apparently yet, perhaps because she's sustained from the estate of the priest, so maybe she can keep eating terumah. But the Canaanite slaves are disqualified. Why is that? The father's Canaanite slaves are disqualified from partaking of terumah because the priest left his wife pregnant when he died, when the priest died. And until the fetus is born, the fetus is not a priest. It's only going to become a priest when it's born. And the slaves who are part of its inheritance, right, when the baby is born, it will inherit the Canaanite slaves that belong to the father. The slaves who are part of the fetus's inheritance are not the slaves of a priest. So, and the fetus does not enable the mother to partake of terumah, even though it is the child of a priest. This is the statement of Rabbi Yosef. So very interesting, right? The slaves apparently already belong to the fetus because it's the inheritance of the fetus now that the father is dead and he left the mother pregnant. He left his wife pregnant. So the fetus has already inherited the slaves, but even though when it's born it will be a Cohen, although if it's a female, it won't be, right? And that's why we're not sure if the fetus is going to be a Cohen. The fetus will inherit, let's say it's the only child, will inherit from the father, including the slaves, but it's not a priest until it is born. The point of bringing this up now is that we're trying to disprove Rabbi Huna's contention that a fetus cannot acquire property. This would seem to indicate that the fetus does acquire property because it owns the slaves, but since it's not a priest until it's born, the slaves can no longer eat terumah until the fetus is born. And then if it's a male, then the Canaanite slaves are once again the property of a Cohen, and they can eat terumah. And the fetus does not enable its mother to partake of terumah, even though it is the child of a priest. This is the statement of Rabbi Yosef. It is evident from this Mishnah that Rabbi Yosef holds that a fetus inherits its father's property. Now the Gemara rejects this explanation. Inheritance is different, since, unlike a gift, it comes into the possession of the heir by itself, without a formal act of acquisition. Therefore, a fetus can acquire an inheritance. Sure, a fetus can inherit property, but that doesn't prove that a fetus can acquire property by way of a gift, because a gift requires some kind of a kinyan, some kind of formal act of acquisition. The fetus can't do that. The Gemara proposes another resolution to Rav Nachman's objection. Again, Rav Huna says that a fetus cannot acquire property. Rav Nachman says that it can't. But let Rav Huna say to Rav Nachman, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, who says, the case of an inheritance is not different, and the case of a gift one gives to his heir is not different, i.e. the same laws apply to both. If an heir can inherit, then an heir can also receive a gift. As we learned in a Mishnah on page 130a, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says, if one said about a person who is fit to inherit from him, for example, one of his sons, that this person will inherit all of my property, his statement stands. Right? He can, in other words, he has three sons who are going to, the firstborn's going to get a double portion, the other two are going to get single portions. But if the father says, I'm going to give all of my property to one of those three sons as a gift, his gift stands. So that would seem to indicate that the laws of gift and inheritance apply equally to an heir can receive either by inheritance or by gift. So that would seem to discredit the idea that a fetus can inherit, but a fetus can't receive a gift, according to what we just heard, if a fetus can inherit, it can also receive a gift, per the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. And the Gemara proposed that resolution, and now the Gemara rejects it. Say that you heard Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka express this opinion with regard to a gift given to an entity that already exists in the world. The heir is here, right? The guy has sons, they're alive. But did Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka talk about a person that is not yet in the world, i.e. a fetus? Does he say anything with regard to a gift given to an entity that has not yet come into the world? So the Gemara proposes a different resolution to Rav Nachman's objection to Rav Huna. Let Rav Huna say to Rav Nachman, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, who compares a gift to an inheritance, and he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, that a fetus is fit to inherit. But the Gemara rejects this also. Who says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef? So the Gemara proposes another resolution to Rav Nachman's objection. But let Rav Huna say to Rav Nachman that the Mishna is referring not to one who gave a gift to a fetus, but rather to one who said, I shall give a certain sum to whoever informs me, the messenger. This person is in the world. But that doesn't work at all, says the Gemara. If that is so, then concerning that which the last clause of the Mishnah teaches, and if there's no heir other than the tumtum inherits all of the estate. If the Mishnah is referring to one who said, I shall give a certain sum to whoever informs me, the messenger, what is the purpose of mentioning an heir, since the Mishnah is not discussing a gift to the heir at all? I mean, if you're right that the Mishnah is only talking about making a gift to the messenger, not to the baby, then why are we talking about which baby inherits? Clearly, it's not that our Mishnah is talking about giving a gift to the messenger. Our Mishnah was talking about giving a gift to the baby. The father said, if it's a male baby, I'm going to give the baby 100 dinars. If it's a female baby, I'm going to give the female baby 200 dinars. And the baby gets it, right, when it's born, indicating that it acquired it as of the time it was a fetus, when the man made the promise. That's why it stands to receive it when it's born, which seems to indicate, again, that a fetus can make an acquisition of a gift. So the Gemara proposes another resolution to Rav Nachman's objection. Let Rav Huna say to Rav Nachman, the Mishnah is referring to a case where the gift was made after his wife had already given birth, but the father did not yet know the gender of the baby. Now the Gemara rejects this explanation as well. If that is so, then concerning that which the latter clause of the Mishnah teaches, that whatever offspring my wife gives birth to shall receive a certain sum, and she gave birth to a tumtum, then the tumtum receives it. Well, then there would be a difficulty. According to this explanation, the phrase, whatever offspring my wife gives birth to, is incorrect. The Mishnah should have said, whatever offspring my wife gave birth to. In other words, you're trying to change the meaning of the Mishnah in order to reconcile this statement of Rav Nachman with Rav Huna, but that's not what the Mishnah said. So this, redrafting of the Mishnah is not going to get us where we want to go. Now on page 142a, and the Gemara proposes yet another resolution to Rav Nachman's objection. Let Rav Huna say to Rav Nachman that the Mishnah is referring to one who says that the transfer of ownership should take effect when she gives birth, at which point the child already exists. But the Gemara rejects this resolution. Rav Huna did not interpret the Mishnah in this way because Rav Huna conforms to his line of reasoning. As Rav Huna says, even if one says that the transfer of ownership should take effect when she gives birth, the fetus does not acquire it. Rav Huna says a fetus doesn't acquire anything. Rav Nachman says the fetus does acquire. Even if the transfer happens after the baby is born, the baby has acquired it from the moment that the father made the promise. The Gemara clarifies, as Rav Nachman says, with regard to one who transfers ownership of an item to a fetus, the fetus does not acquire it. I thought that's what Rav Huna said. Why is Rav Nachman saying that? But if he says that the transfer of ownership of the item should take effect when she gives birth, then the fetus acquires it. So maybe Rav Nachman is not so far away from Rav Huna. He's saying, no, fetus doesn't acquire. But if the promise is made with the stipulation that the baby gets it after it's born, then the fetus does acquire the gift even at the time that the gift is made. It's just not going to receive it until it's born. Okay, that's pretty much where we were. And Rav Huna says, even if the father says that the transfer of ownership of the item should take effect when she gives birth, the fetus does not acquire it because the fetus did not exist in the world when the father sought to transfer ownership. And Rav Sheshes says in both this case and that case, the fetus does acquire the item. Sounds like Rav Sheshes is backing up Rav Nachman. Rav Sheshes said, from where do I say that the fetus acquires the item? How can a fetus acquire an item? As it is taught in a Baraisa. With regard to a convert who died, apparently without offspring. So why are we talking about converts now? Because when a person converts to Judaism, then under Jewish law, his family from before he converted is not related to him. Okay, in terms of halachic laws of inheritance, his non-Jewish relatives are no longer his relatives. It's not to say he needs to break off contact. He can have a wonderful, loving relationship with them. And if he wants to, put in his will that his relatives from before he converted are going to inherit, that's his will. But if we're talking about just strict laws of inheritance, Torah laws of inheritance, in the absence of a will, his relatives from before he converted are not related to him. After he converts, if he has children, then those children are his children. Presumably, let's say we're talking about a Jewish woman. Let's say we're talking about a Jewish man who converted, and let's say he marries a Jewish woman and they have children. So those are Jewish children, and they're going to inherit from him even without a will under the halachic law of inheritance. But relatives that he had from before he converted, they're not his relatives according to halacha. So if a guy converts to Judaism, he's like a lone soldier, right? In the sense that he has no family until he marries and has children after he converts. So let's say that after he converts and he has an estate, he dies and he doesn't leave children or even a wife. He leaves nothing. Okay, so he converted, he had property, and then he dies. So who gets his property? Answer, it's deemed ownerless, right? And so, his Jewish neighbors can now come in and take possession like ownerless property. This is a law we've covered before. Why does this matter? With regard to a convert who died, apparently without offspring, and Jews took possession of his property, assuming that he had no heirs and that his property was therefore ownerless. And subsequently, they heard that the man actually had a son, or that his wife was pregnant, right? His wife from after he converted, or that he has a son that was born after he converted. They just didn't know about it. So now that property that they sought to take possession of, it's not their property. They took it falsely, or let's say erroneously, so they don't get to keep that property. It goes to the man's son. So they took possession of his property, assuming that he had no heirs, and his property was therefore ownerless. And subsequently, they heard that he did have a son, or even that his wife was pregnant. In that situation, they are obligated to return the property. So let's say they returned it all. And then they heard that his son died or that his wife miscarried and the baby is not coming into the world. Then, if one took possession at the second time, right, after they heard about this son and then they heard that the son actually died, then the person who took, it's now the same situation again. The guy died without leaving heirs. But now it's confirmed that he has no heirs. So if somebody took possession of that property the second time after, they took possession, then they heard that he had his son, they had to give it back, then they heard that that son died, and then they took possession again. So if they took possession that second time, they get to keep the property. They get to keep it. They acquired the property. But if these neighbors took possession only the first time, before they heard that he had a son, and then they heard that he had a son, and then they heard that the son died, but they only took possession that first time when they thought he had no son, then they acquired nothing. Rav Sheshes explains, and if it enters your mind that a fetus does not acquire property, why do they need to take possession again the second time? Didn't they already take possession one time? Evidently, the fetus that then miscarried acquired ownership in the meantime. Abaye said in reply to Rav Sheshes, inheritance which comes into the possession of the heir by itself without a formal act of acquisition is different. The fetus of this convert, that he died while his wife was pregnant, and therefore the fetus inherited his property. Well, the fetus inherited the property. The fetus didn't receive the property as a gift. And inheritance is different than gift, says Abaye. Rava said it is different there in the case where the neighbors took possession of the property of the convert, as the property was initially only loosely held in their hands, as they did not clearly know whether or not the deceased convert had heirs or not. Therefore, the first time they took possession was not sufficient, and they needed to take possession again in order to acquire the property. So the Gemara asks, and it's worth saying just quickly that, a lot of these cases, which are unlikely to happen in real life, sometimes can come off as very, craven or materialistic or, uncaring of the emotions involved. But they're really not talking about real incidents. What they're testing is the workings of the law. And, they're sort of creating hypothetical situations where one party thinks he has acquired property or has possession of a property, and then something undermines that legal acquisition or that legal possession, and they want it to be like a fetus that miscarries, because that's a much more interesting case than just an heir showed up from out of town that they didn't know existed, right? Because the question we're asking here is, can a fetus acquire property? Can a fetus receive a gift? They're still testing that question. So the Gemara asks, what is the difference between Abaye's refutation and Rava's refutation? The practical difference between them is in a case where they initially heard with regard to the fetus that he had died, and then the neighbors then took possession of the property. But in reality, the fetus had not died, and then it did die. So according to Abaye, a fetus inherits property. Therefore, the property was not ownerless, and the neighbors did not acquire it. According to Rava, since the neighbors heard that the fetus had died, they took a firm hold upon the property, and they acquired it the first time. Now, the Gemara offers another refutation of the opinion of Rav Sheshes. Come in here a proof from a Mishna, tractate Nida 43b and 44a. A one-day-old child inherits property and bequeaths property. One can infer that if the child is 1 day old, yes, he inherits property, but a fetus does not. The Gemara replies, doesn't Rav Sheshes say that the Mishnah teaches a different law? The Mishnah teaches that a 1 day old child inherits his mother's property the moment he is born, so that he is able to bequeath it, if he then dies, to his heirs who are not the mother's heirs. For example, his paternal brothers. And this law specifically applies from when he is 1 day old. But a fetus whose mother died does not inherit from her. And what is the reason for this? Now on 142b. The reason is that we presume that the fetus died first, before its mother died. And the son does not inherit from his mother while in the grave in order to bequeath the inheritance to his paternal brothers. If the fetus died first, it wasn't alive to inherit from the mother. The law is that if a son dies, and afterward his mother dies, the deceased son does not inherit from his mother, because he died first, and subsequently bequeath the inheritance to his paternal brothers, who are not related to the mother. But in other cases where it is not his mother's estate, a fetus does inherit property. In other words, whether a fetus inherits or can receive a gift, we're not going to learn out from this particular law because it's addressing a different question. We looked at this question, I think last year, right, where a mother and son were in a house that collapsed, and they both died, and we don't know which one died first, right? If the mother died first, then the son inherited from her, and then whatever he inherited is bequeathed to his brothers. But if the son died first, then he didn't inherit anything, and whatever the mother had goes to any other heirs that she has, like, for example, her father or her son from a previous marriage, or etc. Okay, so the Gemara asks, is this to say that it is certain that the fetus died first? How do you know that the fetus died before the mother? But there was an incident where the mother died, and the fetus made 3 spasmodic motions afterward. Apparently, a fetus can die after the mother. Mar bar Rav Ashi said that incident was just as it is with the tail of a lizard, which jerks after being severed from the lizard, but it is just a spasmodic motion, which does not indicate that it is still alive. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Mar, the son of Rav Yosef, says in the name of Rava, the Mishna comes to say that a one-day-old child reduces the portion of the firstborn. The firstborn is entitled to a double portion of the inheritance, and this is calculated taking into account the portion due to his dead brother. And it is in this context that specifically the portion of a one-day-old child is taken into account, but the portion of a fetus is not taken into account, even though a fetus also inherits property. When we talk about reducing the portion of a firstborn, it's like this. Let's say that there are 3 brothers, right? And so if they're going to inherit, there's the firstborn is going to get a double portion. So let's just say there's simply 3 brothers. They're old enough to inherit. They're adults. The father dies, leaves an estate. Okay, so you divide the estate into 4 equal parts. The oldest brother gets 2 of them, and the other 2 brothers each get a piece, right? And so that's the way the inheritance goes. If there's a one-day-old baby at the time that the father dies, okay, so that is an heir. That the one-day-old baby, let's say it's a baby boy, it is going to inherit alongside his brothers. So now there's not 3 brothers, there's 4 brothers, which means we divide the estate into 5 parts. The firstborn gets 2 of them, and the other 3 brothers get 1 each. Now, if this one-day-old baby then dies, so it can't receive its part, so then we distribute its portion equally among all the other brothers. Therefore, it reduces the portion of the firstborn. The fact that it was alive, even briefly, at the time that the father died, is going to end up reducing the portion of the firstborn. We don't say reduces the portion of the other brothers because they get it back. And because it doesn't, that when we distribute what this, baby brother had who tragically died, we don't give a double portion of that to the firstborn. We just distribute whatever it would have inherited from the father equally among all the brothers. And so effectively, it reduces the portion of the firstborn. What is the reason for this? The Merciful One states, concerning the portion of the firstborn, if a man has 2 wives, the one beloved and the other hated, and they bore him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, right, the Torah came to say that the firstborn gets a double portion, even if it was the son of the first wife that the father ended up not liking, and he had a more beloved second wife, and, he would like to give her children all of his estate, but he can't halakhically reduce the portion of the firstborn, no matter who his mom is, okay? But the point here is that the term children excludes a fetus. So in other words, if the baby was born, had already been born, even if it's only a day old, at the moment that the father dies, it reduces the portion of the firstborn. But if the mom was still pregnant when the father died, the fetus does not reduce the portion of the firstborn. So this would seem to indicate that a fetus does not receive a gift, or maybe even not an inheritance. And this is similar to another law. As Mar, the son of Rav Yosef, says in the name of Rava, a son who was born after his father's death does not reduce the firstborn's portion. And what is the reason for this? The merciful one states in the Torah, and they bore him children, and this term children does not apply to a fetus, right? So you get it? If the baby was a fetus when its father died, that's what it means, that it was born after the father died, it's not going to reduce the portion of the firstborn. It doesn't inherit because it didn't exist in the world when the father died. And the Gemara notes, in Surah, they taught Mar's statement that way, but in Pumbedisa, they taught it this way. Mar, the son of Rav Yosef, says in the name of Rava, a firstborn who was born after his father's death does not receive a double portion. You see? Now, then you're like, wait a minute. How could a firstborn be born after his father's death? We get that a baby can be born after its father died, but how could the baby that is born after the father died be the firstborn, indicating that there's other babies younger than it, if it's being born after the father died? Answer, the father might have had two wives. That was permitted in the ancient world, and both women were pregnant when he died. Okay, so then let's say they both give birth to boys. One of them is going to be the firstborn in terms of being born ahead of the other one. But that child, even though it can inherit from the father's estate, it won't be considered a firstborn because at the time that it was born, its father could not acknowledge it as the firstborn. Right? A firstborn who was born after his father's death does not receive a double portion. What is the reason? The merciful one states in the Torah, but he, the father, shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the hated, by giving him a double portion. And in this case, the father is not here that he could acknowledge this baby as the firstborn. And the Gemara concludes, and the law is in accordance with all these versions of that which Mar, the son of Rav Yosef, says in the name of Rava. Accordingly, a one-day-old child does reduce the portion of the firstborn. A son born after his father's death does not reduce the firstborn's portion. And a firstborn born after his father's death does not receive a double portion. And have we therefore proven that a fetus cannot inherit? No. All we're talking about is how it's distributed. So we don't really know yet if a if a fetus can receive a gift or not. Right? Rav Huna says no. Rav Nachman says yes. And is that law going to be the same as for gift and inheritance? Probably not. Seems like according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, gift and inheritance are treated the same, at least for a living heir, but are we going to extend that principle to a fetus, which is not yet a living person in the world? We don't know. We're not there yet. Okay. Let's take some questions and comments on pages 141 and 142 here in Tractate Bava Basra. While my Google Doc is reloading, don't forget to order the greatest gift in town. Let My People Laugh, Greatest Jewish Jokes of All Time. My book, now available on Amazon. Okay. Ilanit. The first time I heard a good reason why a father might prefer a girl to be the firstborn instead of a son. I never assumed there was a case to be made, and here it is. Very refreshing. There you go. Bill, what if the messenger brings news of a viable birth, but it's a tomb? Okay, we've covered so many cases today that I can't rewind fast enough in my mind. But I guess the point is taking what you said, Bill, right? In other words, the father said, whoever brings me a message that I have a male offspring and it's a male offspring, he gets 100 dinars. If you bring me the message that it's a female offspring and it's a female offspring, you get 100 dinars. And if you bring me a message that a male and a female were born, you get 100 dinars. But it's a tomb is born, right? Well, that is not a male or a female at birth. So presumably, the messenger gets nothing. I was thinking that, now remember, as we were going through, good job, Bill, I was thinking the same thing. They said if it's a non-viable offspring, the messenger doesn't get paid. Why not also use the example of the tomb now that we're using the example of the tomb to argue these laws? right nearby. I was surprised that they didn't raise that. Tom, sounds like speculating on commodities trading of futures contracts. It definitely sounds like that. And I would not be surprised if they would use these kind of situations and hypotheticals as a precedent, for actually, if there was a commodities futures trading market, which I bet there was something like that. I mean, we've even talked about that, right? Where somebody says, okay, I'm not sure what the price of wheat is going to be, but I know I need a supply of wheat. So wheat, it's been trading at 100, 10 dinars a bushel, in years when there's a lot of grain, and at 50 dinars a bushel in years where it's rare. We don't know what kind of a year it's going to be next year, but I need to have a steady supply. So I'll say to somebody, let's make a contract now that you sell me all of your grain next year at $25 a bushel. And maybe the farmer thinks that's a good deal because maybe it's going to be one of those 10 dinar years. And if it's one of those 50 dinar years, okay, he's selling cheap, but he's protected against one of those years when there's too much of it. So can they make that deal? That would certainly okay according to Rabbi Meir, but can they make such a deal according to the majority? I'm not going to answer the question right now, but that kind of a situation, that kind of a contract would certainly seem to be governed by, if not these laws, similar laws. Joe, with a twist in phrasing such as, at such time as my wife delivers a child, that child shall inherit my property, would that work for the transfer to someone not yet either conceived or delivered? I think yes. I think you got it, Joe. I think that's right. Right? Because, what's he really saying? The child would be an inheritor anyway. But maybe what he's saying is, whether that child is a boy or a girl, it will inherit my property, irrespective if it's a boy or a girl. Maybe he's saying, irrespective of whether I have more children later, irrespective of the fact that I have other children already, whichever child is born from this wife who's pregnant right now, it will inherit all of my property, right? If he says that, and he's phrasing it as inheritance, it would work certainly if it was a living child, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. The challenge is, did Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka address stating this before the child is born? I feel like we haven't really resolved the question yet. You're asking exactly the right question, and I don't think we know the answer yet. I think maybe we'll come to it tomorrow. And finally, Sharon, why doesn't the wife acquire the property even if the baby dies? In the case of the convert whose property was considered ownerless until its birth was discovered. Right. Why doesn't the wife acquire? If the only relative he has is the wife, why wouldn't she acquire? I think maybe what they're saying there is they weren't aware of a wife either. If they were aware of the wife, they wouldn't have jumped on the property. So it's like he has a wife and a son, but they didn't know about either one. I'm pretty sure that's the answer. So really good question. I hope that's the answer. If that's not the answer, I'm confused. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll see you tomorrow, Thursday, regular Thursday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.